we're focusing on what's happening as a result of the impeachment taking place. Is the second time that President Trump has been impeached within his tenure as President of the United States, Commander in Chief, leader of the free world. And yet he's impeached because, as the statement from the Congress states, he incited an insurrection. And so based on that, I'm joined now by the West Coast Connection attorneys, Mark Harris and Timothy Allen Simon. I should point out that these gentlemen know what they're talking about when it comes to politics and the Constitution. Mark Harris served with the Clinton administration. Timothy Allen Simon served with the administration of Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger when he served California. Gentlemen, looking at this is a heartbreaking moment in our history. How do we move this forward between now and inauguration, when there are so many threats against the United States from the supporters of Donald Trump?
You know, one of the things that I think we should do, Kelly, is arm ourselves with knowledge. One of the first things that comes to mind as I watched that drama play out yesterday in the United States Congress was William Shakespeare's words in Julius Caesar through Mark Antony, when he said, "I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him." That was the overarching feeling that I had looking particularly at the Republicans. I think we need to really hone in on what's going on. This show highlights free thinkers. I consider myself a relatively progressive Democrat. I know that my dear friend and colleague is a progressive former Republican. But I want to really focus in on what I witnessed yesterday and what America has been witnessing before. Now, at this point, the Republican Party wants to disassociate itself in large measure from the president. They view him as a political liability. I don't believe that the impeachment process should be used to remove this sore from the arm of the GOP. They want to prevent him from being eligible to run for president in 2024. They're embarrassed by him, as they should be. And I don't think that this sore should be lanced through the impeachment process. Yes, the Congress appropriately brought charges. The president will be out of office on January 20th, less than a week from now. I don't believe the Senate should waste its time at a time when the country is struggling through COVID, the economic effects, the emotional effects, the social effects, and the health effects of our biggest enemy to date, messing around with a post-presidency impeachment and conviction of Donald Trump.
Mark, thank you for that. Timothy, to Mark's point, President-elect Joe Biden has stated that it's important to be focusing on the pandemic and trying to deal with that. He has acknowledged that the impeachment is taking place, but he's telling Congress and challenging Congress to perhaps do both. What do you say about this?
Well, I 100% support the impeachment. Regarding the Republican Party, I think it's commendable that 10 Republicans led by Lynn Cheney opposed their party, but it was only 10. So I think it indicates that the overwhelming majority believe that the president should not be impeached after on global television inciting a seditious insurrection. That should be troubling. It should be troubling to the party. It should be troubling to our country. I do believe that Congress can chew gum and walk at the same time. They've done it with federal judges in terms of conducting impeachments while at the same time dealing with the nation's business. And the important thing is to send the message, to place the head on the spear, to let the world know that we do not tolerate the commander-in-chief breaching his obligation to the Constitution and the country. And I think that is very important functionally as well as symbolically. The world is watching. And I'm telling you, to them, it is probably a comedy in terms of our allies as well as our adversaries, because we've lectured the world. We've lectured the world on our superior form of democracy, and here we are. So I think it's very important that this country lay down the gauntlet and make it clear that we know how to deal with autocratic despot leaders that defy the principles of democracy.
And we'll take a break. gentlemen, we were talking in the previous segment about the impeachment, the outcome of this impeachment and what it means for our country. And Timothy, you said something in the previous segment about the world is watching, and some of them are probably watching us and perhaps laughing because of the fact that we've always talked about our superiority or our exceptionalism in terms of our democracy. And yet here we are, where our democracy is now being challenged because of so many groups in America that are really challenging the system and threatening to attack all 50 states. As we discussed this just yesterday, this is still out in front of us as we approach the inauguration, and we still have these groups that are challenging the system, threatening to attack the system. It's almost, I'm reminded of covering stories about ISIS and Al Qaeda and all of these fringe groups that have been out there, and not fringe groups that have been out there just for the sake of saying, well, we are against America, but groups that have actually taken lives. What should we be doing in this country to safeguard all Americans, even those who are haphazardly trying to go through with this plan?
One thing you can't do is embrace when it's convenient and disassociate when it's inconvenient. I find it very interesting, and Kelly, this is true on the left and the right. I think those 70 million persons who voted for Donald Trump would say, in large measure, they did not support the actions at the United States Capitol. I think most of them would say that. The problem is you can't have it both ways. You can't vote for Trump. You can't embrace Trump when he's saying and doing the things that you find to be attractive, and then disassociate from those things which you don't. You take it all. And I think that one of the things we have to do as Americans is look in the mirror and to challenge ourselves to be better persons. I know it sounds hokey and corny, but I really do believe that's where we start. I had a long discussion yesterday with my youngest son. The young people are really struggling with this. Our generation didn't struggle. We were told to do certain things, and if we did it, we would have a good life. And I think you, Kelly, and Timothy and I are representative of that. But these younger people are doing the right things and see that there may not be the world that we had promised them at the end of the rainbow here. So I think in order to protect what all of us hold dear, not even 250 years old is this republic, we need to first look inside. We need to challenge ourselves to be better, to answer our better angels. And we need to move forward collectively and together. I know it sounds difficult, but we have to force ourselves to do that.
You know, to your point, my children are shaking their heads and they're looking at this, and my grandchildren are looking at this and saying, what is going on here? And it's, you put this against the backdrop of a COVID-19 pandemic that we're all dealing with. It is very disheartening and threatening. Yet, Timothy, somehow I think we can overcome this, but we've got to overcome it by seeking our better angels.
I've said this many times on your program, Kelly, and as always, thank you for this invitation. I'm shocked that we're shocked, and that includes me. If we looked at the history of this country and the retaliations that have occurred going back to the Southern Redemption during Reconstruction, there's always been a pushback when there is a perception by the status quo, and in this case, I mean much of white America, that there are gains being benefiting the formerly enslaved. This is very consistent with American history, and that's what we and our children and our grandchildren witnessed on January 6th. Could we predict it would be in the actual form of attacking the Capitol and push, disconnecting the panic buttons of Ayala, Congressman and House Representative Ayanna Pressley, and all the other intricacies of this terrorist attack? No, that probably was kind of beyond foreseeability. But the fact that there would be a revolt by way of the election of Joe Biden, that's what they were telling us they were going to do. And it's consistent with this president's need to delegitimize institutions and individuals who lead institutions in this country. This has been very consistent with his political path.
We'll be back with more after this. I'm kind of at a loss for words, and I'm never at a loss of words, but when I think about this, I was driving through my home area, the nation's capital, and I saw, officers out there and military officers out there, and you couldn't go, you couldn't walk freely along the National Mall. In fact, the National Mall is closed right now. So this is an odd time that we have in our history, which is why it's so important that we continue to have dialogue and explore what's the underbelly of all of this hostility and hatred. And I think both of you have talked about it very eloquently and very passionately. So how do we get to that underbelly, which would be the nationalist groups that are out there trying to get this kind of ginning up the masses, if you will? Shouldn't Rudy Giuliani be responsible for saying, let's have trial by combat? Shouldn't Representative Brooks have some accountability and responsibility for saying, we're going to go out there and take names and kick asses?
Yes. In short, yes. And those who champion and cheer for that kind of behavior. I hear people as I move through my life, and unfortunately it's virtually right now because of COVID. I don't get out and about the way I used to physically, but through the virtual space, I listen to friends. And one of the things that's very troubling is you're all in on one side of this or all in on the other. My liberal progressive friends hate Donald Trump. They hate who he represents. They hate what he represents. I have said from the inception, this guy isn't strong enough. He's one of 45. He's not strong enough, as far as I'm concerned, to get me to hate him. Number one, against my faith. Number two, he's only one president. And as we now know, he'll be out January 20th. Has he left carnage in his wake? Absolutely. But should we just be so just bottled up with rage and anger that this one guy in less than 4 years has brought down the republic? I think that says a lot about us more than it says about him. So I would challenge us to seek our better angels. I'm going to keep embracing that concept. As corny and hokey as some people may think it is, that's the only way out of this. We can't let hate be doubled and tripled down. We can't let anger take us to a point that sacrifices the Democratic Republic, otherwise known as the United States of America.
Yeah, Mark, I understand. And Timothy, look, what he just said reminds me of the civil rights era when John Lewis and Joseph Lowery and as well as Martin Luther King Jr. and Andy Young, they were all singing black and white together, we shall overcome. Yet in that we shall overcome, it takes a heavy lift to get to the mountaintop in the promised land, and you got to go through some struggles.
Malcolm X said, it's not we shall overcome, it's we shall come over. And, I think we have to remind ourselves that we as African Americans, when we engage in peaceful protests, and even when that peaceful protest tips over, when we deal with the desire to simply have equal protection of the law and the privileges and immunities that are granted by our constitutional government, we are so often lectured on nonviolence. We're reminded over and over again about the importance of nonviolence. But where does the violence come from? Let's look at our history. And that's what America needs to do if we're going to heal. Functionally, we need a 9/11 commission type structure to deal with domestic terrorism and white nationalism. As we go through this process, Fred Hampton was shot and killed in his sleep.
Yeah.
COINTELPRO went out to assassinate and divide those who simply wanted justice and fairness for a people that gave 245 years of enslavement and another 100 years of Jim Crow. And some young people stand up and say, we're not going to take this any longer. And then they become the targets of this government. So we have to go through a truth and reconciliation if we're going to heal and begin to have meaningful change in terms of dealing with domestic terrorism.
Coming back with more after this. Do you think the Senate will, do you think Mitch McConnell's just waiting for an opportunity to come in and actually go ahead and carry out the impeachment trial? Or will he
The,
wait
po-
after the inauguration?
the politics of this would say yes. They wanted the Republicans, I believe, and Timothy's in a much better position to know the temperature of the Republican Party than I am. But I get the sense the Republican Party wants to disassociate itself from Trump, and they will use this potentially as a way of doing that. The most important part of the Article 2 implications of impeachment. Article 1, of course, is the congressional process. Article 2 talks about the remedies. What do you do once a president has been convicted under the impeachment process? And of course, the lifetime ban comes into play. It takes 2/3 to actually convict him under impeachment in the United States Senate, only a simple majority vote to ban him from ever holding federal elective office again. I think we could move in that direction. I don't know if it would be the right thing to do historically. No president has ever been subjected to that. Only 3 presidents have ever been impeached. None has ever been convicted. But we'll see how this thing plays out. And I think Mitch McConnell and the Republicans are leaning towards being done with this guy, to bury Caesar rather than to praise him.
Timothy, as a former Republican, what do you say to your party?
I think the divide between the traditional Bush-Reagan Republicans and the more hard right Tea Party, fiscal hawk Republicans will continue in the party. The issue I have now is that I don't see in the ranks of the pecking order of who could be the next Republican leader anyone that has the amazing communication skills of Donald John Trump, whether you like him or not. You know, he's the John Coltrane of the dog whistle. He can put out a tune like Charlie Parker. He has that ability to enrage people, those who are part of the grievance, the grievance culture. He can enrage them like no one I've ever seen. And I don't see it in Josh Hawley. I don't see it in Ted Cruz. I don't see it in Mitch McConnell. We can go all down the ranks of the heir apparents or the contenders. So I think this struggle within the party will be prolonged and protracted in order to establish who is the new leadership. Barack Obama once said that America needs a strong Republican Party. You know, we are a 2-party system. And even though I'm no longer a member, there are aspects that I learned as a Republican that are still incorporated in my daily life and my goals and missions and things of this nature. So, but I think it's going to continue to be a rocky road for the party.
Thank you both. Obviously, we'll be talking between now and the inauguration, and there's just so much at stake. Again, I think prayer is always on order for this time that we're living in right now. Timothy Allen Simon, Mark Harris, thank you both.
Thank you, Kelly. God bless.
God bless you. Back with more after this.